Welcome to Rapid Fire. I'm your host, Wolvie, and I'm here with Jack. He is also part of the LoadedBolter family, as well as myself. We're trying this whole new thing that we are doing. I'm going to be rapid firing some questions at him. There's 15 questions. The whole idea is for him to answer them as quickly as he possibly can. There will be a leaderboard for everybody who partakes over this, and we will keep track of who's the fastest. We may invent a prize. We don't know yet. It's still early days.
Whoa. You said nothing about a prize.
Well, a prize out of my pocket. Like,
okay.
We'll call it that rather than any sort of LoadedBolter mutual fund. And then once we've done the rapid fire section, we will delve deeper a little bit more into Jack's hobby life, how he got into it and things of that nature. So I'm going to start a timer in any second. So if you let me know when you are ready, I will fire the first question.
Okay, tip of the tongue and the teeth of the lips, tip of the tongue and the teeth of the lips. Yeah, I'm good to go. Let's go.
I like the training.
Let's go, yeah.
Right, so go. How many years have you been in the hobby?
3 years now, yeah.
What game systems do you follow?
Originally, my big game system is 40k, getting into Sigmar, but realistically, I started with Dungeons and Dragons and started to go down the miniature side of that as well. That's where I started.
Fantastic. Reel off your current armies.
Okay, well, my current armies are the Sons of Bahamut, the Age of Sigmar army. I'm getting into that. I have an Imperial Knights army. I'm getting into a lot of the Inquisitor stuff. Sisters of Silence is a new and growing one, but my biggest one is my huge Adeptus Custodes army, which I absolutely love.
I can verify that's huge. What was your first miniature?
Oh, my first miniature was when I was 10, and it was a Necron. Oh, what are they called? It's the Necron, one of the Necron Lords or Necron Crypt Lords. I love those old pewter models. They were so good.
Yeah. What was your first full army?
Adeptus Custodes.
Okay. What model or unit have you enjoyed painting the most?
The Mega Gargants, the War Smashers, are just beautiful models. I absolutely love how detailed they are. But the new kits coming out of GW are amazing. But realistically, the one I loved and spent more time on is Trajan Valoris. And Constantine Valdor, I loved his painting as well.
Fantastic. What model or unit have you enjoyed painting the least?
Oh, so many. No, that's a lie. Probably one I've enjoyed painting the least. Probably Sisters of Silence. They are fiddly little girls. They really are.
Got you some for your birthday.
I love them.
What was the last model you completed?
Oh, my War Smasher, my Mega Gargant War Smasher. So yeah.
In hours, how much painting time do you think you get per week?
Well, I'm recently coming back into it after a little bit of a drought, so I think roughly about 8 hours a week now at the moment.
Okay. What is the current model you're working on?
Currently, I have just acquired for my birthday a big old dragon model, which was from a lovely guy on Etsy, Lord of the Print. Beautiful looking red dragon model, which I'm going to be starting on today. I'm also starting on a Gate Smasher, Mega Gorgont, and I've recently just got for my birthday, thanks to these guys, a lovely Charon Pattern Assault tank for Sisters of Silence and some Sisters of Silence models. So I'm looking forward to that.
There's a lot going on. Single favourite thing about the hobby?
The community. Love it. I love the social aspect of it. And the competitiveness to a certain level when it comes to painting, I think is really cool, because it's not as if I'm doing better than you. It's the pushing each other to become better painters, I think, is probably the biggest aspect for me. Yeah.
Flip side, what's your least favorite thing about the hobby?
On the serious side of this, probably the gatekeeper aspect of it.
I think that's going to be a common answer.
Yeah.
Who or what got you into the hobby?
Mr. Alex Coombs got me into the hobby.
We'll delve into that in a minute. What keeps you in the hobby?
The people, the painting, and the lore.
What is your hobby target for 2021?
To finish this Red Dragon and probably have a full Sigmar army.
Fantastic. Well, that is all 15 questions answered. You did them in 3 minutes and 27 seconds.
Oh God, that sounds so bad. That's like Richard Whiteley level of top gear. Terrible.
I think you just expanded in places, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So now I'll ask you kind of a few more questions about your hobby, and we can start fleshing out some of the stuff. So obviously you mentioned about a young man by the name of Alex Coombs. I've not met him, but obviously everybody who we play with sort of knows him. So, you know, how and when did that happen? When did you kind of, you know, when did he tempt you over to the dark side?
Well, that sort of happened because as previously said, I am a Dungeons and Dragons player. I may be a big collector of custodian stuff and Warhammer stuff in general. But if you look at that, imagine my collection of D&D books, and imagine I've been doing it far longer and far more into my D&D. I love it so much, and so I was starting to get into the idea of branching out into collecting miniatures and models for that, so I could use them in my game. And Alex has always really wanted to get into Sigmar stuff, and he'd always been saying, "Oh man, you should get into 40k." I was like, "No, I don't really get sci-fi. Really don't. I don't get the sci-fi of 40k."
Don't get sci-fi, but I can map out an entire D&D world.
yeah. I don't understand it. I don't get it. It's not my cup of tea. And then, like, as a lot of people do, you start looking on the GW website, and I love dwarves. I love the whole lore of dwarves, like going back to Nordic mythology and Tolkien's mythology and the basis of where he writes from. And so I started looking at Fire Slayers, and I remember Alex just texted me one day after me badgering me to get into Age of Sigmar, and he was like, "Oh, we should just play a war game, like whether it be like War Machine or anything else." And after months of him badgering me, I just went, "Well, I've actually been looking at Fire Slayers." And so I got into Sigmar, and unfortunately at the time, Sigmar had just started to come out. The reputation of it wasn't great, and the game mechanics of it wasn't fantastic. It was very heavily bent towards Stormcast or Undead. Anything else that you really wanted to play wasn't exactly great. And so, unfortunately, it left me in a pretty bitter place. However, on the back of that was when the Adeptus Custodes got released for 40k.
They are eye-catching.
Well, I just saw them, and like I looked at everything else in 40k. I looked at Tyranids, I looked at Necrons, and as I previously said, when I was 10, I did collect a Necron army, but that had been years ago. I kind of forgotten about it, and the love wasn't there much for it. But then, looking at Space Marines, I was like, I think it's a common thing with a lot of people with Space Marines. It's like, oh, it's okay. It looks kind of the samey. It hasn't really changed in its kind of imagery since like the early 90s and stuff. But then I saw the Custodians, and I was like, that is basically just a Byzantine looking medieval knight with a power sword and heavy armor. And I was like,
they've got the big red like ceremonial ponytails. They've got, you know, the big old. They do look like almost they're as close to a medieval knight as you will get in 40k in terms of the way they look.
Exactly, and because of that, I was very attracted to the aesthetics of them and the gold of it. And then you do the part, and then you do the next bit, which is you look down the lore. And I think it's at that point, that's when you know you're in to an army. It's when you look down the lore, you just go, yes, that's for me. And for me, the biggest part of it, and I described this to a couple of different people, in the way the Adeptus Custodes are in their lore, like they were being with the Emperor since the starting of it all, since the Unification War, since getting rid of the tech berserkers on Terra. That while all of the Primarchs being spread across the galaxy, the Custodians were there, Valdor was there, all these icons of the Custodians were there. And then when the Emperor died, they went into drastic mourning, and all their sons started fighting amongst the territories. And I always compare it to is if you ever go, I know this is a bit sad, but if you ever go to a funeral of somebody and you don't look at the kids who might be mourning their parents in a different way, but you look at the friends of that person, and that you see how torn up they are, and they can't really do anything because they're not the family, they're just the friends, but they're the people who are suffering so much in a different way than the other people. And I always looked at the Custodians and just went, like, yes, they might be, you know, psychologically changed to not feel fear, to only command, only to obey, to be killers in the right hand of the Emperor, but they still mourn the loss of him, because about everybody in the 40k universe who's alive today, Malcador's gone, Dr. Astartes is gone, all these people who have been there since the beginning of it all are gone, except for the Custodians. They are still there, and they miss how it used to be, and they look at the Space Marines as like children, because they have to try and, in a way, they maybe aren't as active as like other 40k factions, but they try to just be the hand on the tiller, just to make sure that nothing goes too far. Just try and steer a little bit to the left, try and steer a little bit to the right. And when you look at them in that way, I just fell in love with them, that overarching guarding of the original principles, away from the ecclesiarchy, away from other ideas. But that's what kind of stuck with me.
I mean, that's one of the awesome things about Custodes. Whilst they are an elite army in terms of you get like not many models in an army, but having played against them, they are worth it, and they are every bit the way that they should be. And they kind of almost, when you say, oh, you know, I'm going to be facing Custodes, or you read on social media someone saying, oh, I need advice on a list, I'm going to face Custodes, everyone kind of goes, you are in for a hard time, son. And I think they get that perhaps more than just the meta armies, because of how they're built. They are built in such a different way to all the rest of the Imperium armies, particularly, that they bring with them the fear that they should have, which is insane, because obviously Space Wolves might go for a bit of it, Dark Angels might go if they're up in the meta, but yeah, with Custodes, you're like, there's just you're gonna have a hard time, and that's no matter where they sit in that tier list.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing that when they first came out, they were an army that no one had any idea how to deal with. But then very quickly people became accustomed to how to deal with them. You shove a load of bullets at them and you shove a load of psychic power. Now, however, with the new rules to, like, point exchange is the big thing. Detachments is the other biggest thing. It's made us a big difference for us. And the change to storm shields, point storm shields and detachments. Now you see Custodes not being the top, and I'm fine with not being the top. I don't want to be the rule breaking, everything changing list. I just want a list which, if I go to a game with someone I've never met, we can both have a good time. Because previously in 8th edition we sucked.
Yeah.
And that was something I struggled with, but I kept with it, luckily, and I'm now in a good place.
The good thing with your Custodes army is that you can use it in 40k. And you can also pop it out for a game of Horace Heresy. So whilst they might be double the price, you get double the game, because you just have to buy a book and you're fully set, ready to go for Horace Heresy. Now, a few of the lads from our group are trying to tempt me over to the Horace Heresy side. Now,
you can do it, man. Come on.
I'm not so sure, but for someone who's never played a game of it, what would you say are the main differences between Horace Heresy and 40k?
Well, speaking as a person who's only played 2 games, I would say that, okay, not to be mean about GW and 40k as in general, but we were having a quick discussion about this off camera, about the difference of rules, and actually it's something they're doing much more in 9th edition now. In a way that early 9th and 8th itself was constructed, GW looked at a mechanic and they went, okay, we want to give a unit a +1 to hit against a certain type of unit. Okay, now let's look at the unit we want to give it to. Okay, it has this small little thing in its lore, okay, and it kind of fits. Let's take that, and then we'll give it, that's the reason you got the +1, and then we're done. And then everyone was left going, but that's not even the coolest thing about that unit. Like, it does so much more, but that's the thing I'm highlighting. It's like, it's fine. It has the modifier, which led to a lot of armies and models having the same abilities, just renamed and reskinned, which just led to a lot of things just being defunct and not very cool. But with Horace Heresy, what I like is what they've done is they've looked at every model and they've gone, okay, this model has 5 or 4 or 3 cool things about it. Okay, each one of those things we're going to look at and go, this mechanic, this thing needs a mechanic. Let's design a mechanic around that, and then that's the model. So you have models which have completely different mechanics from any other thing. So, like, for example, with Custodes, if you're using a normal sword and board guy, if you want to target a model and you pass through a model that has a shield, you have a -1 to hit, because you're going up against the shield wall of the Custodes, and that's a -1 to hit. That's a pretty ubiquitous term and a mechanic, but you wouldn't have it if you didn't have a shield. And what's the biggest thing about that guy is the shield. I just think the rules are certainly more thought about, streamlined in a certain way. Things die quicker, so don't get attached to things. Templates so quickly. Like, you
Yeah,
don't have 14 wounds.
Game of Thrones taught me not to love anything, so these days I
No.
can just let things go.
Yeah.
But I think when it was put to me the other day, you know, when they were trying to tempt me into the Horace Heresy, they were kind of saying the rules are logical, whereas the 40k universe, the rules don't necessarily fit, or something doesn't. It just happens because it happens. Whereas in Horace Heresy, there's a reason. There's a reason that, like you said, there's a reason that model has that rule. There's a reason that you have to do a certain thing. So everything follows a bit more of a logic. You might need a small mortgage to play the game. However, it's a more logical version. Unless you buy custodes, because, you know, 2 in 1.
I mean, I'd still say there's a small mortgage in my display case right now.
Don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. I think the rules just make sense. Even the basic ones, like to hit and to wound, it just makes sense. I can't wound a tank with a pistol. It's just illogical.
And yeah, I know that with 40k they almost take the well, there is a small chance that a guardsman with a lad's gun could pop a rhino from however far away. There is a chance that he might hit the fuel cap and it goes through, and if he rolls a 6, that's what happens. But that's one of those rules where you just think, does it need to? I get that everything should be able, because they went too far. I think it was in 7th where certain things couldn't hurt certain things, and sometimes you turn up and field an army and you'd be like, oh, that guy's got a land raider or whatever. I've got absolutely nothing that can do a bit of damage to it, so that's just going to roll around and kill me, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I get that you have to find a balance between that, but you know,
yeah.
So I'm researching, but I haven't fully committed yet. I've still got to finish the 2 new armies I'm coming out of lockdown with. So
you're telling me you don't want to play as Russ? You don't want to play as Lehman Russ?
I've just sold a Space Wolves army. I don't think I can go. I don't think I can go for another one. So obviously, you, before coming onto the 40k and Age of Sigmar and stuff like that, D&D is a bigger love for you. Now, I know that you could probably sit and speak for hours, but, you know, we've only got kind of so long. You're quite the map drawer. I've seen some of your maps. They're pretty cool. You've written all kinds of campaigns. How many campaigns have you run now?
So, for those of you who don't know, D&D is Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing now since I was 19, so 8 years. I've been running now for 6 years. I have run in my life multiple one-shots. I probably put that in the near 40 one-shots for people. And one-shot, if people don't know, is a singular storyline which usually takes place in about 2 to 3 to 4 hours, and you sit down and you play for that one little bit of segment of storyline. I saw about 40 of those. But in my life, I think I've run about 6 campaigns. I'm running 2 of them at the moment. One of which is a campaign that we play with our friend Johnny, who's also part of our player group, which has been going on for coming up a year. But the other one is my long-running campaign, which is sadly coming to its end, which I've been running for 4 years.
And that's the thing, like, obviously having seen your maps and having seen the things that you've drawn up just from screenshots and stuff here and there, like, that's 4 years of something going into a campaign. And like you say, you're a year into another one. I've never played a minute of D&D. It's just not so. It's not that I haven't wanted to, it's just that the opportunity's never presented itself. I wouldn't know what to do if somebody said, there you go, you're gonna, here's D&D. So that I'm sure I could learn, but yeah, these things are a massive labor of love, particularly if you're the DM.
Yeah, and one of the main things for me, which some people come up to me and say, oh, like I would want to get into D&D, but I don't know how to do it, or like I have no group to play with. And for me, it's like, well, just learn how to run. Like, it's intimidating. Yes, I totally understand that. You don't need to be like me. I've got, let me do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I would say about 30 books or 40 books, all of which cost money and stuff. But you don't even need any of the books to do it. And as long as you are keen to learn how to write a story, run a story, become better at describing things, and have fun, D&D to run is an absolute pleasure. D&D to play is very easy to pick up. especially when you have a couple of people who know how to do it, and even then there's so many tutorials online that you could easily find out how to do it. People get intimidated because, as I say, when I tell people I've been running a game for 4 years, they go, wow, okay, I do not have much commitment. It's like, it doesn't start like that. It starts as a game, and then, you know, sometimes you miss a week, sometimes you and sometimes you don't. But it never starts out as like, we're going to play this campaign for 5 years, I need you all to make time commitments of at least one session a week. It's not like that.
No.
We play a game that, luckily I have a group which loves the game I run, acknowledges the fact I'm not the best story writer in the world, but it's kind of let me get away with it, and is just committed to the story we as a community of players have created. Because that's, you might have spotted I'm a big lore lover, a big story lover, but that's the main thing that keeps my D&D campaign going, and keeps D&D going, is the love of the story and less of the mechanics. The mechanics are secondary to the beautiful stories that we create within the game.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about D&D, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but it certainly seems to be how it looks and how I've seen other people kind of, once you know how to run a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, you can use that, but put it in the Batman universe. You can put, there's even a Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons. You can literally, anything you know, Star Wars, even use 40k. If you know kind of what you're doing, you can create any universe and use D&D style mechanics and create something. So even if your friends aren't into, you know, oh, I don't want to make a character to do that. All right, well, you're an elf from Lord of the Rings. Do you want to do a Lord of the Rings version? Or, you know, do you want to do a Star Wars version? You can be either, you can start off as a stormtrooper or a renegade. Like, you can create any universe you want if you know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to go like, oh God, am I designing all this stuff? No, people also have these thoughts. You go online, go to check out DM's Guild. It's a free website by Dungeons and Dragons, which has a load of published adventures by people who love the game. They put it on there. Some people charge, but that's only because they are doing it themselves. People have come up with using D&D 5th edition mechanics, which is by far one of the best mechanics base that you can use for games as a and they've done it in the Star Wars universe, the Lord of the Rings universe, the Warhammer universe. Don't know if they've done 40k. I expect someone might be coming out with a Warhammer fantasy one soon, judging by the interesting news we got the other day about Magic the Gathering and 40k. It's something we might want to talk about at some point. But if you don't want to run in a typical fantasy universe, you know, typical D&D universe, that's fine. If you want to run the Star Wars universe, you go and do that. It's all about finding the setting that works for you. And even if you don't want to play D&D, run Call of Cthulhu, run the Lord of the Rings setting one. The Warhammer fantasy roleplay book is really good. The roleplay system is fantastic. So if you want to run that as well. Don't be just, I recommend anyone getting into tabletop RPGs because it teaches so many skills which you can really take into real life. And it certainly increased my happiness and the happiness of my players.
And that's kind of why we all do the hobby, isn't it? So it's not a question that I had written down, but we will then cover, seeing as you brought it up, Magic the Gathering and Warhammer coming together. How do you feel?
Okay, I have already voiced this to some friends of mine, and I personally think it's one of the, I don't want to use the word worst, but it's certainly up there. Look, okay, let's firstly acknowledge one thing, is that I don't think it works. I think it's a choice they've done from a financial standpoint, and they just want to merge the two kind of backgrounds and fans together. Because you like a tactical war game, why not a tactical card game? Secondly, I just don't know how the mechanics are going to work. You're going to lose fans on both sides, as you are now. And I just don't think it's necessary, really.
Yeah, for me, I used to play a lot of Magic the Gathering back in the day. I was far more into Commander. I was never a very good deck builder. I couldn't tell you what went well. That wasn't me. But Commander, you give me a deck, you sit me down, I know what I'm doing. But one of the first things that struck me is, why pick or seemingly pick the 40k universe? The fantasy stuff would feel a lot better to the Magic the Gathering, because Magic the Gathering fans would be like, oh, this is cool, it's similar but it's different. And then from a Games Workshop standpoint, you would think, oh, well, that might entice them to buy some models and to play our game, and vice versa. The people that are playing the Fantasy or Age of Sigmar, whichever universe they chose, they're going to go. So that would be more. I just don't see how 40k is going to work, because it'll be a standalone thing. I just don't see it personally.
I mean, can you honestly? I don't see why it has to be a standalone thing. You surely cannot use them in normal games.
No, I don't see how that would work. But where do they draw the line? Do you suddenly get every 40k army gets one, and you run it a bit like Commander? That's the only way I could see that it would work, because then it would be its own self-contained game. Whereas at least with the fantasy stuff, you could write it somehow into the Magic the Gathering, and you could possibly do more in terms of the crossovers there. But even then,
exactly,
it just feels like if they have picked 40k, which seems to be the case, they might have made a mistake.
Well, they've done it really purely for the fact that 40k is the bigger license. Let's be honest, it's the more big.
And every card game
license
that Games Workshop have tried to make hasn't really sold. So let's give it to the guys who are the best card game makers out there.
And also the designer of the most successful, most widely used tabletop RPG system, where I love the Warhammer system, but let's be honest, it's not successful. It's not successful. And because you've heard of D&D, you haven't heard of the Warhammer. There are very few people who would say, oh yeah, let's play Warhammer fantasy roleplay. So in my mind, it's a decision that allows them to go, oh yeah, let's bring a new card game in where we've failed, and then possibly let the Wizards of the Coast guys take the setting and then using their mechanics, create some books for it, which I think would happen. But for me, it comes down to a story implication, and this is a very nerdy reason why I don't like it. Wizards of the Coast released a couple of years ago, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which and in that it's a plane that you can exist, and in the laws of D&D and in the magic of it, if you know where a realm is, you can travel there and you can get into it and you can come back. So in my world, you could go to Ravnica, which is in Magic the Gathering's realm. But if it's not standalone, it means you could have a Blood Angel popping over to Ravnica and then popping into my world, because it can magically go from 40k to Ravnica, then to any other D&D world and to anywhere. So it's a very pernickety reason. I just don't like it. It comes down to the other reason. I just don't like it.
Well, I think with that, the clearest thing is time will tell just how successful that works out to be. So I have got 3 final questions. So these should be relatively quick ones compared to the chat we've had.
Sure. I'll try and answer quick.
In terms of, think of any game system you've played, the one that stands out the most to you. What is your favorite in-game moment, or at least one of your favorite in-game moments, where something's happened and it's just like you've just gone, wow, that was awesome, or it's just memorable for a reason?
I mean, like, so many from my D&D campaigns, a couple of really nice twists, but they'll take too long to explain. My favorite probably has to come down to the game we had when you had your Space Force army and my Custodians army. It came down literally to the final roll, who won. And if I hadn't made a stupid decision with a command point, I would have been fine. But because of that, I lost. And it was such a good game that we both just went, we don't care who wins. This is amazing.
Yeah, so for me, I've had like 2 games where it's come down to the last dice roll. I think this was back in 7th. I had a Wolf Lord on an objective, and basically it was a saving throw. If I did, I ended the turn holding the objective and won. If he died, it was and I lost. Whereas the situation with us was a little bit different. So, just to give a bit of context for people. So, what model was it from the Custodes? It was your.
Oh, it was my Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike.
Yes, and he was 10 inches away from just some basic Inceptors. They were just basic Inceptors. They had the big plasma things. They made I think it was a 10-inch charge. You spaffed your command point on something else.
Well,
Which,
this is the
well,
thing.
it just seems like such an impossibility. So what if they do charge? They're just going to come at you with a Space Marine slap, and what's it going to do? And yeah, it was literally the last dice roll of the game, and the Space Marine slap did the job. So I got, I think it was assassinate. I got something, which
4 points
yeah,
from assassinate,
which took me over, and the game literally ended 63-62, I think it was.
that was it. Yeah,
And it was literally like that. So in terms of standout like game moments, that one was just one of those ones, and I'll pick it over the other one simply because I won this one. But I didn't. But realistically, I didn't really care, because it was just like, this is awesome. We had it on tape for the lads and everything. It was just one of those.
It was one of those games that you and I both thought, oh, this will just be a big fist fight in the middle of the board, and actually it turned into such a tactical game of like deep striking down, like making our way around. Murderfang was just trying desperately to get through the captains.
Blender, and yeah, my fastest unit, which was the Inceptors on that day, I literally kept them on the back of the board doing nothing for most of the turn, and then when I was like, I'm gonna have to do a Hail Mary here, that's when they charged out of that little hiding hole, and in they went. So yeah, so that was pretty awesome. So next question here: hobby aspirations over the next 12 months. I know we slightly covered this off camera, but over the next 12 months, what would you like to achieve within not just this hobby, but the miniatures hobby in general?
Yeah. Well, I would like to, one, become a better baser, which I'm currently working on doing. I want to finish this big red dragon. I want to start and finish this red dragon, which I'm really looking forward to. I want to get a Mega Gargant's army up and running, which would be expensive, but I think I can do it. Also, it's going to take a lot of time because they're beautiful models. Realistically, it's just getting to a point where I don't burn myself out, because I think last year I did so much. I decided to completely strip my Custodian's army and redo it entirely, while also buying a lot more and doing that. I think I burnt myself out far too quickly. I want to get to a point where I can pick it up and put it down and not get overwhelmed. And I think just finding a healthy balance between enjoyment and commitment is a nice place to be in.
So I kind of feel on that one. Obviously, I've had a lot of time over the last few months to kind of do hobby, hence why I've sold a Space Wolves army. I'm going to be coming out of lockdown with 2 brand new armies, but unlike you, I can't necessarily put something down. Once I know something's on the table, it's just there. I'm like, I've got half an hour, I'll just do. So yeah, it's finding the happy place before, making sure the painting is still giving you that joy and that mindfulness of that, end of the working day, using a bit of time to paint and just switch off, but being able to switch off and not being obsessive about it. So yeah, that's a pretty good thing. So and on that, the final question, because we've spoken about miniatures and everything like that, what would you consider your other hobbies outside this hobby as your final? Obviously, I know you play bass guitar.
Yeah, I played bass guitar. I used to do it professionally. Unfortunately, due to lockdown and change of lifestyle, it hasn't happened. I want to get back into that as well. When lockdown happens, I want to actually get some lessons again, which would be nice. I obviously D&D, writing and running D&D. I'm currently working on. Funny we mentioned this. I'm currently working on a Warhammer Old World Fantasy crossover document using 5th edition mechanics for Warhammer Old Fantasy, which may be useless if my hypothesizing is correct. I don't know. I also like to draw, write. I need to get back into the gym, but realistically, it's my biggest hobby is D&D and Warhammer painting at the moment.
I think for me asking you these questions, and for anybody who is still with us after how much time this video has taken, I think we're all in the hobby for that, and I think we just try and absorb as much as we can. It's an obsession, you can't help it. It just becomes an absolute obsession. So
I also like to cook as well, which actually have become fairly big recently. But other than that,
sometimes that can be good for the mindfulness. It can also be really stressful if it doesn't go how you want. I've learned recently I can cook, but I can't bake. I don't know what goes wrong. I don't know what it is. That's just, it's the science of it, I think, that loses me. I just go, flour, icing sugar. It's flat. I don't know why it's flat.
Rough approximations of weights.
just it's the science of it. It just kind of loses me. So with that, I will thank you for your time, and we will stop there. So thank you for joining me on that.
Not a problem.
And I'll see you again soon, or I'm sure some of the other people will pick up interviews as well as time goes on.
Absolutely. If you want to find me, you can find me at my miniature paintings at Sundown Miniature Painting.
And that'll be down below.
Down below. And it should be coming up with some new posts soon. Hope you all enjoy it. And thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.